What if the secret to a truly happy life wasn't about what you get, but about what you build for other people? It's a fascinating idea, right? Well, today we're diving into the incredible story of Booker T. Washington. This is a man who went from being born into slavery to becoming one of the most influential leaders in American history. And along the way, he discovered something profound, a kind of blueprint for joy he built piece by piece. We're going to call it his architecture of altruism.
This right here, this was his guiding principle. Those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. Now, that sounds simple, but think about it for a second. It's kind of backward from how many of us think, right? And it's especially mind-blowing when you consider who's saying it. This quote is really the core puzzle of his life. How does someone who started with every reason to be miserable unlock such a profound secret to happiness?
So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a man born into the most brutal circumstances imaginable figure this out? Well, to really get his philosophy, we've got to understand the world that made him. So let's follow his journey from the very bottom and see how he found a kind of joy that, honestly, most of us spend our whole lives looking for. Okay, so our story starts in a place of unbelievable hardship. We're talking about the pre-Civil War South, where just being born was his first and biggest obstacle.
Just look at the timeline of his early life. It's just staggering. In 1856, he's born into slavery. He doesn't even have a last name. By 1865, he's free, but with absolutely nothing. Then, get this, in 1872, as a teenager, he travels hundreds of miles, mostly walking, just for the chance to go to school, and he pays his way by working as a janitor. I mean, this is so much more than just determination. This is literally building a life from less than nothing.
This quote from his autobiography, wow, it just puts that hardship into perspective. He said he couldn't remember his family ever sitting down for a meal together. Instead, meals were gotten to the children very much as dumb animals get theirs. Just let that sink in. It wasn't just about the backbreaking work, it was about being denied the most basic human dignity. And that experience, being treated like he wasn't fully human, became the fire that fueled his entire life's mission to prove the worth and intelligence of his people once and for all. So, how did he do it? Well, that mission found its home in the one project that would define his life. You could call it the Tuskegee experiment, and it was an idea so ambitious it was going to completely change the game.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 1881. Booker T. Washington is only 25 years old, and he gets asked to lead a brand new school for African-American students down in Tuskegee, Alabama. The state gives him a charter, basically a piece of paper saying, you can start a school, but that's it. No land, no buildings, not a single dollar. All he had was an idea, and all that grit he'd earned his whole life.
So what do you do with nothing? You build. First, he buys an old, rundown plantation for the campus. Then he teaches his very first students how to make bricks out of the clay they found right there in the ground. And with those bricks, they built the school. They literally built their own classrooms, their own barns. Think about this. Their education wasn't just reading books. They learned chemistry by testing the soil. They learned math by figuring out the blueprints for the buildings. This wasn't some abstract idea. It was real, it was practical, and it was incredibly empowering.
This whole philosophy had a name: industrial education. Now, the point wasn't just to train a bunch of farmers or bricklayers. No, the goal was much, much bigger. It was about building a foundation of real economic power. Washington's bet was this: if Black Americans could become so skilled, so essential to the Southern economy that society couldn't function without them, then respect, and eventually political rights, would have to follow.
And he drilled this mindset into every single student. It was basically the story of his own life summed up in this incredible quote. Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he's had to overcome while trying to succeed. It's not about where you end up, it's about how far you had to climb to get there. But, this focus on economics didn't come without controversy. In fact, it's probably the most debated part of his legacy. Because while he was saying one thing in public, he was doing something very, very different in private.
So, publicly, Washington became known as an accommodator. He gave this really famous speech in 1895, the Atlanta Compromise, where he basically suggested that Black Americans should focus on learning trades and building wealth first, and not push so hard for immediate political rights. And boy, did that draw criticism. Other major leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois were furious. They thought he was giving up the fight.
But here is the twist, and it is a big one. That public persona, it was a mask, a strategy. While he was out there preaching patience,
Behind the scenes, he was secretly pouring his own money and money from his rich friends into funding major lawsuits against segregation and racist voting laws. He was playing a brilliant and incredibly dangerous two-sided game. He calmed the white power structure with one hand while using the other to secretly fund the fight to tear it all down.
So when you step back, you start to see it. The school, the complicated politics, the secret legal funds, it wasn't random. It was all part of one grand plan, a true architecture of joy, designed not for his own benefit, but for generations to come.
Washington became this amazing channel for philanthropy. He was a master at building relationships, and he got some of the richest people in the country, guys like Henry Rogers from Standard Oil and Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears, to pour millions of dollars into his vision. And the key was, he convinced them to invest not in him, but in building the entire infrastructure for black education all over the South. And the result? It was just massive. The partnership he inspired with Julius Rosenwald alone helped build over 5,000 schools, workshops, and homes for teachers. 5,000! Think about that. He wasn't just building one school in Tuskegee. He was planting the seeds for thousands of them all across the South. And right there, you see it. His whole life became the living proof of that idea we started with. That true, deep happiness isn't about what you get for yourself. It comes from the act of building something for others, from creating chances where there were none. His joy came from dedicating his entire life to lifting up a whole community. So, what are the big takeaways from this incredible life? Well, first, that true joy really is found in serving others. Second, to measure your own success not by how high you get, but by the obstacles you had to overcome to get there. He taught us to build with what we have, right where we are. That economic strength can be an unbelievably powerful tool for change. And maybe most importantly, that sometimes the quietest, most behind-the-scenes work ends up having the loudest impact of all.
You know, Booker T. Washington started with just a piece of paper, and he built a legacy that changed millions of lives. So his story leaves us with a really powerful question, one that's for all of us. Looking at your own life, with the tools and the skills you have right now, what can you start building for others today?